This conference will now be recorded.
Guess so.
Good afternoon. This is Frank Neples from the NOAA Climate Program Office. I'm the CLEAN co-chair and the facilitator for today's call. So before we get into our presentation, and our presenter is with us, are there any announcements or items that we need to talk about first before we get into this week's presentation? And just as a reminder, this is 10 years of weekly telecons for the CLEAN network, over 10 years, which is just a stunning thing. We haven't done every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Eastern time, but a whole lot of them for 10 years and more. So that's still something amazing. So anyway.
10 years deserves a round of applause.
Thank you, Wendy. Always love your enthusiasm. So, but anyway, do we have any announcements for the community?
I have a question and an announcement. So I didn't know what percentage of the call might be devoted to AGU conversation or whether we're holding that for a week a little bit later in November. And also a corresponding question of, I'm unclear what level of CLEAN presence is going to be present at AMS Annual in Boston. I don't think it's much, but I also don't think it's zero. And I am wondering if anyone is clear on that.
So, Wendy, I'm not sure about the AGU planning calls. I know Katie is working on a kind of a document that kind of captures the CLEAN presence at AGU. So I'm not sure where that is in process, but I think it's
done,
fair.
And I sent it out to the listserv last week, and I've just put it into the chat as well. So take a look at that and add to it if you want. Yeah.
Okay, so that just shows my state of denial over getting ready for AGU, because I'm sure I saw that, filed it, and said I'll look at that later.
There it is. There it is.
Okay.
So that's AGU, but yeah, Wendy, I think it's totally appropriate for you to kind of send out. I think I can't remember who did it for NAAEE. It might have been Regina or no, somebody else. Anyway, but I would just use the listserv for that task, just to see who's going to step forward and say that they're going to be part of the AMS community. That would be my suggestion.
Okay.
And for those going to AGU, we're going to plan for our get together Wednesday after the conference. And I think there was some discussion of having more of an AGU discussion on one of the next couple of calls. I think the next couple of weeks are more open. I don't think there's any presentations planned. Is that correct, Patrick?
Yeah, we do have a couple things coming up in early December, but I think shifting that conversation to next week is a
Yeah, I agree. So maybe we'll add AGU to the discussion for next week, and maybe if you can join Wendy, we can ask about AMS as well. I will be there, so at least we'll have that, if that helps. I'm looking forward to it. And I had a quick announcement since we're on the topic of AGU. I wanted to mention the get together on Wednesday, and then also that there are sessions. I sent an email out last week with this link to the various sessions, the CLEAN specific sessions, and then also related sessions we think might be of interest to the group. And if others find other sessions I didn't find, feel free to add them. And then I wanted to also mention that I'm sure many sessions, not just mine, but I had a couple of sessions looking for judges for I had 2 students in 2 of my sessions that are doing posters. So I sent an email about that last week, but I'll probably send a reminder in the next week or so. So yeah, please also look through the OSPA and specifically maybe through some of our CLEAN or climate literacy sessions and help out if you can with judging student posters.
Awesome. Any other items of just the future work, items for the discussions that we need to talk about? or any other announcements that are out there?
There's yeah, there's a meeting coming up in Los Angeles, Hollywood Health and Society. It's a climate storytelling thing. I'll share a link to that. Give me a sec.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other items out there? Yeah, Katie, would you mind posting? No, go ahead, Patrick. Go ahead.
Oh, I just want to throw it out there. So I couldn't come up off the top of my head. I think it was last week when we had Celia presenting around where I'd read a recent conversation about using the 97% figure in discussions around climate change. And I remembered it was in Max Boykoff's recent book. So I put the link to that in the chat. He presented it to us last spring. And so I just wanted everybody to know it's out there, it's published. The announcement's a little bit late, but please check it out, Creative Climate Communications.
You know, Patrick, as you mentioned that, I'm wondering if we shouldn't ask John Cook he's currently with George Mason University, to present on all of that work, because he was one of the originators of that, and some of the work relating to that. At the Wild Center's Adirondack Youth Climate Summit, a climate scientist there, Kurt Stranger, if I remember right. I don't know if Jen's on the call, but he even took it further and went into some of the research about Catherine Hayhoe's subsequent research on the 3% and what exactly is that 3%. And that was incredibly revealing. Not everybody knows that work, so that might be important for the community.
Yeah, that'd be great. If you can connect me there, I will reach out.
Okay, I'll do that. And Katie, do you know that new link that we put up on the NGSS page? Would you mind putting that in the chat? I don't have the ability to do that where I am, but I do want to highlight a document that a community of us put together related to where climate shows up in the NRC framework and the NGSS. It's just a comprehensive, basically how learning moves across them from kindergarten to 12th grade. And there are 3 different systems for indexing where that learning is. And and the third one is from the clean community for the clean collection. And I thought that we had done this work and no one really knew where it was. So we, created a document that kind of captures that. So hopefully this is useful for other people in the community. But just take a look at it, and if you have any comments or feedback, it's a dynamic document. It's not finalized, so we can always make modifications if somebody sees something that would be useful.
Yeah, and I think I just put that in the chat. I just have a PDF of it, but I know it's still in flux. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Perfect. All right. So, any other items for us before we get into the presentation? All right, we can always come back at the end, but so it's a real pleasure to have Arle Castellanos. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Did it. Just being humorous with my language abilities. So, she's the executive director for and sustainability tracking program director for the Green School Alliance. And so it's really great to have you with us today. Really important topic. And I don't want to, since we've had a long announcement session, I just want to get into your talk about achieving whole school sustainability is challenging. So, this online tracking approach that you guys have been working on is really important for our community. So I want to thank you for your time. So over to you, please.
Thank you so much. Hold on, of course this shows up right now, sorry. So thank you so much. As Frank introduced me, yes, I am Arle Castellanos. Obviously none of those are easy to say, so I congratulate you for doing so. So before we jump in, I just want to thank everybody for making the time. And I wanted to give you guys a little bit of background on the GSA before I actually speak about the tool itself. So the Green Schools Alliance is a network of self-identified sustainable schools. And our program was initiated in 2007, and it was inspired by Mayor Bloomberg's challenge to reduce carbon by 30% by 2050. So initially, it was a group of concerned independent schools, primarily in Manhattan, who had come together and said, we want to create initiatives around sustainability in our schools and find a way to sort of collaborate and share best practices. And so the first planning session for this was at the Allen Stevenson School, and there was 46 schools in attendance. From there, we have grown sort of exponentially. Now we are over 8,000 schools. We have over 13,000 sustainability coordinators. This is 49 states, not 4, and 91 countries. And the other thing that was really important to us and sort of showing our leadership was this program that we developed called the District Collaborative, which is a group of advisors from 26 of the largest school districts across the United States. So that includes Chicago, New York, San Francisco, San Diego, Los Angeles, Clark County, which is in Nevada, and essentially bringing the heads of either sustainability or facilities and having them speak once a month about the things that they find important. Because we really understood that to really create sort of mass change around things that were important to us, things like policy, that it was far more impactful if we were doing it collaboratively and we were showing ourselves in numbers. The other thing that schools do when they join is we ask schools to sign what we call the leadership commitment. The leadership commitment is a non-legally binding commitment to sustainability. And the leadership commitment plays an important role in our tool START, which I will get into a little bit later. And that is if you are a school who signs a leadership commitment, schools do not have to, but we do sort of ask if they can, is that once you actually sign the leadership commitment, then you are saying that once you go through START and you have your reporting mechanism and your scorecard, that you're going to allow that scorecard, no matter where you are on your sustainability journey, to be fully accessible to the public. And so currently these are all the leadership commitments that have been signed by all of our schools. And now I'd like to get into why START. So why this tool actually came. So when I first joined the GSA, I've been with the organization for about 4 years. A lot of my work was really trying to understand what was the need. We had almost 9,000 schools. A little over at the time, we had a little over 7,500 schools. Now we have close to 9,000 schools, and sort of listening to what it was that they wanted. And we kept getting the same 3 questions. And that was, where do we start? So some schools would come to us and say, I don't even know how to start a recycling program, or how do I create a green team? The other thing for schools that had started programs was, how do we establish and benchmark our current efforts so that we know where we've come from and where we need to go? And lastly, what else can we do? The how. And the how is the part that I'm most excited to address, that we've actually done extensive work around, because this is the actionable, this is the thing that schools come to us and ask for. The tool itself sort of answers these highlighted yellow portions. We created a bit of a word cloud to understand out of the needs that were coming from these schools, what were the primary things that they wanted addressed when we were creating this tool. And so those actionable words as well, on the far left-hand side, identify those. So the basis for START came out of a research study performed by the Institute for the Built Environment at Colorado State University. And they had created, there was a grad student there who had created a paper, and it was called the Whole School Sustainability Framework, which some of you may be aware of it. And essentially what they decided was that in order to invigorate a school with whole school sustainability, you really needed to address these 3 aspects. And those were physical place, educational programs, and organizational culture. And so physical place is fairly easy. I feel like, anytime you talk to anybody about what it means to be a sustainable school or a school that's taken the environment into consideration, people usually quickly say, oh, is it that you're teaching students about the environment, or is it that you're changing out light bulbs? But the one piece that a lot of people miss, which I think is actually the most important aspect, is the organizational culture and behavioral change, which is also the hardest to measure, which is why I'm really excited that, hopefully with this tool, we'll be able to address that. So from there, we created an actual framework. So if you see here the three-pronged approach, we pulled it apart. And for each of those categories, we created subcategories. And so these are sort of our various subcategories for each one. Within each of these, we created different focuses. So in totality, we have 53 metrics. Within every single metric, you have a beginner, intermediate, and advanced. We also did a metric evaluation for every single metric. And the way we did that is that we decided that each one had a cost, difficulty, and impact associated with it. Sorry, somebody is unmuted and I can hear them. And so anyway, so we decided that when you do gain points for START, the sort of point values associated with it, you do not gain points for cost. You only gain points for difficulty and for impact. And the reason we did that was because we didn't think it was very fair for a private school in Malibu, California to gain all of the points associated with cost just because they could afford it. We also implemented the impact value chain to really, again, understand sort of the inputs and outputs for every single one of our metrics. Another thing we did is we took a look at the green ribbon applications, which is created by the EPA. Every single state has their own application. And what we wanted to ensure is that for every single one of our metrics, we took a look at their pillars to ensure that we were addressing them. Because when we were first building out START, people sort of thought like, why would you be creating this tool? Green pillar, green ribbons already exists. And it does, but the problem is there's sort of no national standard for what it means to be sustainable. It does exist within their own states, which is really great to understand how individual states are attacking environmental issues. But again, being able to sort of certify that on a more national level wasn't something that was being done. The other thing we took into consideration with our metrics was the UN sustainability goals. When we first did our initial run through of our metrics, it called attention to 10 of the 17 SDGs. As we sort of continue to progress and build out START 2.0 and beyond, we want to make sure that we are addressing all of those other SDGs that we may have not addressed in our first iteration. So here is a nice little screenshot of our metrics. You can't read them on purpose. I just wanted to be able to show you sort of what the back end looks like. This is what we ended up ultimately giving our developers so that they could build a beautiful algorithm that actually works as a tool and tells a story and allows you to play an interactive role in sustainability. And so within here, you can see the categories, which is, the whole school sustainability framework, the subcategories that we created, and then the various focuses. And then with each of these are the tiers, the cost, difficulty, and impact, the impact value change, and the SDGs. The next portion of this is I'm actually going to get into the tool itself. The first part of this is it has a sort of a profile interface. So you'll be able to quickly indicate, where your school is located, how many schools it has, what, population of students you have. The other piece for this is the wizard. The wizard is the START tool itself. At the end of it, you get a scorecard, so it tells you actually how you've done. And the reporting mechanism is really important for individual schools, again, to really benchmark their work. But beyond that, the reporting mechanism is really important for districts. For us, we know that districts want to be able to see, New York City has close to 2,000 schools. Los Angeles has about 1,000 schools, and so for them, it's so much easier for them to do their reporting with us because they can quickly say, okay, how many of the schools have completed, metric 53, and they'll be able to just log on to START and refine those searches and identify those schools as opposed to trying to find them. One really fun fact about New York City Department of Education is that NYC DOE is the only district in the entire country that has a mandatory sustainability coordinator in every single school. So sustainability is really, really important to New York City. And we've been working with them for a really long time. Part of the reason why our district collaborative was really successful is because the first district we onboarded was New York City. And whenever a district says like, we don't know if we can do this, we always, can very quickly say, if New York City can do it with 2,000 schools, you can do it with your 16 schools. So also we have user levels within the tool itself. So you can yourself give yourself super user access, and you might say, you know what, my colleague can also get super user access, but you might say, I don't want the teachers to be able to change certain aspects of the tool, but giving everybody sort of their selective access is really important. Maybe you have a really engaged senior, you want them to be able to use it, but then you also have the public view, which you might say, I want my community, I want my other schools around the region to be able to see our scorecard. They won't obviously be able to click on anything, but being able to view it. The second part of that is schools being able to choose whether they want to make their scorecard visible to the public or not. I know that some schools have contacted us and said, hey, because we don't have any initiative set in place, we really don't want to make our scorecard available until we've done 10% of START. We're going to allow schools to make that decision on their own, sort of a toggle on, toggle off. Okay. Another part of the tool that we're really excited about is we have a little bit of a questionnaire when you first onboard yourself to try to see, what measures, sort of programs you've already done, whether they are GSA related or not. Because of the tool being developed by this organization, by this development house named Malka, and the person who is the founder of Malka is a PhD student who came out of the energy department, and he essentially created all these really beautiful visualizations around energy data, and that was really what he wanted to do. And so when we came to him and said, hey, can you build START for us, the really great aspect of this is that he already had plugins to make our tool more robust almost instantaneously. So if you onboard yourself to START and you have Portfolio Manager, we have automated green buttons. So you won't have to manually import any of that data if you've already done it. It'll just plug right in and all of your data will be saved to START. And so now I'm actually going to show you some wireframes of what START looks like. When you first onboard yourself, it asks you a series of questions. Everything on this page will be really interactive. You'll be able to hover everything. Everything will expand. It'll give you a little bit of a walkthrough, but it also just tells you a little bit about the journey you're about to embark on. And again, for this segment, you'd be able to click on it and it would show you, the reason why cost is sort of partitioned to the side is again to emphasize the fact that it does not count against you. And so here is the wizard at 0%, meaning none of it has been filled out. We wanted to make sure that when you are looking at the wizard, you could see all of the metrics in this sort of blocked area. And the reason we wanted to do that is to ensure that if you are going through START, you don't have to go through it linearly. You can jump around. You could say, you know what, I happen to know more about education. I know, Marcy in facilities knows more about physical place. And again, so it just sort of allows people to jump around in a way that makes the most sense to them. This is the actual wizard. So once you're actually going through and filling out START, this is what it looks and feels like. You will, click on, if you happen to answer this question. It was funny earlier, Patrick had mentioned that some of the writing in here was blurry. We did that on purpose. We didn't want people to be able to really read it, but we just wanted you to sort of visualize it. And so if the metric might say something like, does your school have a green outdoor learning space? And so if you were to click on 2, it would automatically click on 1, and you would get your points associated here on the upper right hand side. These 3 boxes on the bottom, the add notes is exactly that. You can leave notes to other people in your school or other people who are filling in the metrics with you for them. You might say, hey, Patrick, did we fulfill this metric? I know last March, so on and so forth. The help us improve is exactly that. It's feedback to the GSA about this metric. And the help us improve button exists throughout the entire tool. We really, really want to understand if the metric that we created, really makes sense. Maybe there's too much jargon. So it's really just helping us create better metrics. The upload file is exactly that. You can upload a video, pictures, PDFs, whatever it might be in order to support this metric. This is the metric list view. Again, many ways that you can sort of interact with the different metrics. For this one, you'll be able to scroll up and down. There'll also be a search box here, so you can quickly, indicate which metric you want to just jump to. If it's highlighted in blue, it means that you have left something in there, whether it's a note, whether it's feedback, whether it's a file. If it's grayed out, it means that there's nothing in there. And then obviously here on the far right-hand side, it shows you, what tier you answered. So the START guide is something that I am most excited about. This is the how that I had mentioned earlier. And so these populate when you're on the wizard and you see these more info. So it's not just about giving you a point and saying, great, like you've done this metric. If you get to this metric and you either don't know how to do tier 2 or you don't know how to do tier 1, it doesn't just say, great, let's move on. You don't get any points for this. We want to make sure that you do know how to actually do this metric, and we want to help you in that process. And so if you click on more info, it brings you here to the START guides. The guide here will give you a brief explanation on what the metric is, because sometimes you may not be able to answer the question because you don't fully understand what the metric is. So this is sort of the support for it. This button right here is a start forum. So if you click on it, it would shoot you over to the discussion forum within the GSA website that is dedicated to other people who might be having conversations around this metric. So again, there's a sense of community around filling out START and being able to talk to other people. This is a START blog. So it's exactly that. If you want to blog about the metric, how you're implementing it. And then this is success story. So if you have successfully implemented this metric, we want to hear from you. We want to know, what was your process? What did you do that was maybe different from the START guides? And then within each of these, we have actual how-tos. And so the how-tos were written by students. And we did that on purpose. Implementing sustainability in the school is most impactful if you actually have your students participating in that process, and I think everybody can agree to that. So we wanted to make sure that the voice of that was being done by those students. So I had a group of, I think, 10 to 15 interns who were writing these how-to guides. My youngest was a freshman in high school, and I had up to grad students all creating how-to guides for START. And so within these, there's additional resources. It gives you the cost, difficulty, and impact here on the upper right-hand side. And this is again the how. One of the things that we're really excited about, in addition, is that we have a partnership with Greening Forward, which I don't know if you guys know who they are, but Greening Forward was started by a gentleman named Charles Orgbon. I believe he was a sophomore in high school. I think now he's either graduated a year or two out of college. But at the time, he was in search of trying to implement sustainability efforts in his school, and he would go on the internet and he couldn't find resources or guides that were written for students by students, and so they didn't speak to him. And so he created this nonprofit in order to do that. And so we have a partnership with Greening Forward, and so Greening Forward is going to give us all of their guides, and they're actually going to be embedded within START. And one of the sort of my long-term plans is to be able to do that, is to be able to onboard, other people's resources and how-to guides, and being able to create sort of a Yelp aspect to them, so that you can say, this one's really great, give it a star, make it sticky if a lot of people are using it, but it being also to discuss the how-to guides, similar to a recipe where the recipe might call for cream cheese, and you did it with cottage cheese, and so you might say, hey, this is how we did ours a little different, and this is how it worked. The how-to guides will be tagged by the individuals who are building them, so they can say, this how-to guide was written by a school in Northern California that was interested in, water conservation. And again, just to ensure that if you are looking for guides, it'll be sort of this library of resources that you can really sort of refine your searches and find what you want. Because that is how people use the internet now. For me, it's really important that you have that refining component, similar to being on Amazon. You can find anything because you can do that. And so we are doing that with our how-to guides. We're doing that with START in terms of the directory, which I will explain in a little bit. But anyways, here's the actual scorecard. Which is really beautiful and colorful. And so you get this little stars right here, and it says where you are in your journey. There's up to 5 stars. It gives you your points, it gives you your average, it sort of shows you how far you are. Again, this is super interactive. Everything you click on expands and tells you more. This is the directory, which again is very exciting for our sort of districts and who want to be able to see all of their schools on sort of a macro view and a micro view. For this view, I just did districts. So this really large section of the pie is New York City. I believe this is Denver, and this is Orange County, which is in Florida. And so you'd be able to click on this, which here it is. So if you click on it, it sort of refines the searches, the information on that district here at the bottom. So again, just sort of everything expands and moves. And so now I want to get into the START expansions. Once we are fully launched, we want to be able to onboard the Green Cup Challenge. The Green Cup Challenge is a challenge that's actually been around longer than the GSA. We sort of took it over. Essentially, there are 4-week challenges that the schools embark on, and the schools sort of indicate where they go into their meters and they indicate where they are, and then they compare themselves to the year prior. And so the competitiveness around improvement is based around themselves. What we did a few years ago is we actually went to Con Edison, which is our energy provider here in New York City, and we said, hey, we have this energy challenge. Would you like to sponsor it? And they were totally on board. And so we were able to onboard way more schools to participate in this challenge, and from there, Con Edison ended up giving the winning school $1,000. And so when I presented this to other districts, they thought, this is a great idea. And so there's not just the energy challenge, there's a recycling challenge, there's a water challenge, and there's another challenge that isn't part of the original Green Cup Challenge, but it is a challenge that we think is important, and that is a no idling campaign. And this came out of it came out of Georgia. And we took it on. And again, no idling is obviously a really important factor in most states. New York City obviously is slightly different. And the last thing that I wanted to speak on in terms of where we are with START is something that, when I had initially spoken to Patrick, he had asked me about equity. Does START speak to those schools in sort of regions where there are low income communities? And I'm really excited because a few months ago, I got a call from the professor at Colorado State University who oversaw the project around whole school sustainability, and said, hey, I got a call from Missouri Green Schools, which is a nonprofit that is trying to help schools in rural Missouri integrate sustainability efforts in their schools, and they wanted to build START. They wanted to create metrics around our, the whole school sustainability framework. And I told them, don't do that. Speak to Arle. She already has a tool. And so I did a presentation. They absolutely loved it. They had funding to be able to pay for it. So we're going to be doing an expansion project to pilot START doing a customization component specifically for Missouri. And the reason why that's really exciting is because they will be able to speak to that equity component very, very strongly, because a lot of their schools are in low-income communities. And one of the things that they're really focusing on is sort of that one-on-one support and being able to work with schools on the ground, which is something obviously I, here at the GSA would not be able to do, but I would love to be able to use the methods that they take as sort of a case study and a pilot to be able to, contact other regional nonprofits similar to Missouri and saying, hey, you can use START, and this is how Missouri affected these schools that might not even have internet. And so we started working on this project, and I got a call from Kansas, exact same conversation as Missouri. And so now I'm having a conversation. So now Missouri is fully on board. We're going to start doing the customization for them starting in the next few months. Missouri will be fully launching their portion of START in the fall of 2020. And what I find sort of amazing about this is that, I guess, sort of long-term planning is there a way for me to take the green ribbon applications and inject them into what we have at START, so that you can, everything is weighted on a national level in the way START is written right now, but being able to say, can we create these customizations where you're creating either the application or metrics that are specific to your region. So that is the end of my presentation. I would just like to end by saying that START is not launched. We are launching in January of 2020. And before I sort of open up for questions, I would just like to, I guess, put forth my asks. What are my needs from the community? And that is help us get the word out about START, whether they are schools. Like I said, we've gotten calls from nonprofits. We have partnerships with a few universities, Arizona State University, Colorado State, obviously, UC Santa Barbara, who have initiatives with local high schools and middle schools and elementary schools. And so, we're partnering with them to be able to launch START. And then the other aspect of this, our ask is, we need the resources to scale START, and that is in the form of obviously funding, but also people. And the third part that is really important to me is insight. I want insight from various individuals who work in the school communities to let me know what you believe are the hindrances or the barriers for a tool like this. That's my presentation.
Is Frank still on the call?
I don't know, I hope so.
Oh, he's muted right now. Yeah, well, thank you so much. That sounds really neat. Oh, there you are, Frank. You want to take it?
Yeah, I was speaking in such eloquent ways, and yet somebody muted me.
Probably in the middle there. I think Patrick muted everybody or something. So.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So wonderful presentation. Really excited about what's coming. I've got a lot of things I'd like to explore, but before we do that, I'd like to see if there are others that have things that they would like to clarify, explore, dig into your 3 asks, which is wonderful that you've given us that. So let's open up the floor and see where we go. We have about 20 minutes.
Thank you, Arlie, for sharing.
Don't be shy.
Yeah.
Well, if people are going to leave the floor open, I mean, I'm just, it's very exciting what you're doing. So I have asked you one.
Okay.
At Drawdown Learn, the ECOS group met after, which is the Education, Communication, and Outreach Stakeholders Community, which is like the clean for the international community. And one of the people there, Saffron, is working on the SDG Indicators project. And have you seen the SDG indicators project? And two, specific to SDG 13, which is probably the closest to the clean community, which is, it's not exclusive at all, but just the closest. 13, has an explicit education ask, but it also has some other things. Can you talk a little bit more about SDG 13 and how that relates to your program?
So we have, I actually had it before and I don't have it now, but we actually went through and figured out which of our metrics sort of aligned with the SDGs, not the other way around. Unfortunately, when we were building the metrics initially, the SDGs weren't sort of at the forefront of what we were thinking. Now that it's sort of come that way and that we've actually, sort of integrated which SDG fits into to start, we can sort of then speak to the ones that we haven't fulfilled because we've only done 10 out of 17. We obviously have a lot around climate action, but it's just, yeah, that's sort of the indicator is, does this metric speak to which SDG?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So down the road, just to clarify, we, as people who are not working directly at a school, we would be able to see, is there documentation, available once you go live, or can you share that with us beforehand? Just to look at the tiered approach for, looking at the SDGs versus the indicators that you have in your system. Is that something we can see?
You mean it's something that we can see which of the SDGs speak to it?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's in. So obviously what I said, I didn't want to make this fully visible because these are all of our metrics. But yeah, so each SDG actually tells you, like, this one's 11 or 3 or 4 or 13 or 13, 4 or 13. So you can see which one is tied to it.
Perfect. Awesome. Very exciting.
Yeah, and I had one of the conversations I had with UC Santa Barbara was there are SDGs that we did not mention when we created our metrics initially, and hopefully a project I'll be able to do, whether it's a fellowship or a capstone with some of their students, is building out those additional metrics that are specific to the SDGs that we did not cover, or just creating more specific metrics that are tied to that SDG in some way. So I would be interested in seeing the SDG indicator project because I have not seen that.
Sure, happy to. Just to give you a little context, all signatory countries, and the United States is one, are supposed to be reporting what they are doing to implement the SDGs across the country. So supposedly there's somebody at State Department who is responsible for SDG indicator compliance.
Right.
I would imagine as your system goes online that they would love to know about you. I don't know who that is yet. As a federal civil servant working in non-State Department, but related, it's somebody I'm looking for, but I've not heard who that is. But I think down the road you're going to want to know who that is, so you can build a reporting pipeline, up and out, and then also this might be useful to those other countries, so there's some coherence.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is the question we've gotten. Even though START was really written for US-based schools, I've gotten calls from schools in Iceland and Denmark and Germany and France, who are obviously in more developed countries, asking about START. And I do have a few individuals within those countries that want to use START as is, and give me feedback. How much of what we created can align with the work that they're already doing, since it is, all of the language is very school specific. So, it shouldn't really be that difficult if sort of your country is sort of similar to the US and some of its like parameters. That why wouldn't you be able to use START? Sort of long term. And again, that's something we're thinking about, right? How do we expand this tool as an international organization to be an international tool?
Right. Other points? Has anybody come up with one yet?
Well, it sounds like you're sort of in a testing phase. I'm kind of wondering, are you opening this up for feedback, and how actively are you looking for participants to play around with as you develop it?
Right. So it's done.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fully
Okay,
done.
great.
Yeah, the one thing is that it hasn't been launched. So, as
Okay.
of about 2 or 3 weeks ago, the developers opened it up to me to be able to sort of poke around in it, right? So for 3 hours, I just played around with the tool, pushed a bunch of buttons, and they watched me to say like, hey, like that button is not supposed to do that, or so forth. So as of right now, it's just beta testing it for functionality. And then what we're doing is in January, when I finally, hopefully by then our developers are completely done, I can start onboarding. I have a list of about 50 independent schools that have all, had we applied for a pretty hefty grant from the E. Ford Foundation, who gives money primarily to private schools. And we created this coalition of schools and said, if we win this grant, we will use the money to onboard these 50 schools first. And then beyond that, I have a sort of rolling list of schools that have contacted us and want to be able to be onboarded onto START as soon as we start doing that piloting phase. So as of right now, it's like really, as of right now, I'm the only one sort of poking around in it. Once I open it up for testing, it'll be just some of the people who work with me, some of the people who are on my metrics committee. And they're just, again, going to be sort of playing with the tool. None of the data will be saved. But once we open it in January, then that'll come from where, where we'll actually start onboarding all of the schools. And we do want feedback, obviously, from schools, which is why throughout the entire tool, there's the option to give us feedback. So we're always looking for that. It doesn't matter if you're a pilot school or a school that's using it 3 years from now. For us, what's really important is being able to collect as much data as possible. One of the things that I'm really curious about is really seeing, are a lot of schools implementing metric 17, but no school is doing metric 10. And so understanding why are so many schools doing these metrics versus other schools not doing other metrics, and being able to sort of take that data and bringing it to academia and saying, hey, can you guys do research and figure out like why these schools are or are not doing these other metrics? Sort of, again, being able to create a landscape scope on what is and isn't possible, and understanding the reasons why.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one clarifying question. When you speak of schools, are you only thinking K-12, or is higher education, like the work that Second Nature and ASHE does, is that part of this, or is it just K-12?
It's just K through 12. The GSA has always been a K through 12 organization, and so when we created START, it again only spoke to the K-12 community. But when I was at Drawdown, there was a few college students in my presentation who had asked, can we use this in our school? And sort of the framework for what we've created is obviously, accessible. But I think sort of the way the metrics are written may not speak to some of the more advanced aspects of what they're doing. But for us, this is START 1.0. We already are thinking about START 2.0. And because we have so many independent schools that are looking to use START in more advanced ways, we're already looking at, what are the high buildings performance components that we can add to this, right? So there's, if you want to do START 2.0, it's obviously going to be, it's sort of a plug-in, which something, people will recognize now is that it'll, come at a higher cost, but it'll allow you to say, hey, what are, I want to be able to actually have meters installed in our schools, and we'd be able to do that as well because we have partnerships with those individuals.
Gotcha. Awesome. Any other points? Lots of people being quiet today. Arla,
Thanks
it's
for
an
sharing.
awesome thing you're doing. Very, very exciting, very important. Do you have a sense of the 15,000 school districts and you know, I don't know how many schools there are in the nation at the K-12 level, but you know, what do you have a percentage of you know schools that are already looking in this direction versus where the growth is?
Oh yeah, I mean it's amazing. So we don't really do, I give presentations and so forth, but we're not doing any sort of, mass marketing of any sort. It's all sort of if you Google sort of green schools, the GSA is high on Google search. But it's a lot of word of mouth. And I would say, I think within our first year, I'll probably be able to onboard between 200 to 500 schools. And that's individual schools. Our plan is to obviously onboard all of those districts. So if we onboard all of New York City, that alone is 2,000 schools in one go. And so it's, do we count that as 2,000 schools or do we count that just as the district? New York City has already, they're committed to using START. San Francisco is committed to using START. Los Angeles is committed to using START. Chicago, which thankfully those are like the absolute largest districts. And I just last week, was on a call with a smaller school district in Oregon. So the district need is coming really, really strongly. And again, it's because of that sort of reporting mechanism that's really important to them that nobody else is able to provide for them. And it's really expensive to build, and we have it. So they don't have to do that. So
right.
Yeah, I mean,
awesome.
So I would say, if we onboard all of those districts plus the individual schools that have contacted us within a year, we would have like 5,000 schools.
Right.
Which is crazy.
That's awesome.
Which is again like a thing around capacity that I'm like, it's very evident to me that this is already sort of catching fire, and I'm really afraid. It's a good problem to have. But yeah. So if you guys all want to come work for the GSA when that happens, that'd be great.
You need a surge strategy.
Yeah, well, no, I mean,
right there.
This is why the sort of Missouri thing occurring was so serendipitous, right? They're a nonprofit who's really interested in doing a hands-on approach with integrating sustainability, and they're going to be doing the hand-holding. They're going to be going to the schools, and they're going to have them work through START. And so like how do I energize that sort of approach? How do I find other nonprofits like Missouri and Kansas and say, we are the mechanism by which you can do this? And if you have, $10,000 to spare, you can do a customization component for START that calls attention to the needs for your region, because that's how much it costs. Just so everyone knows. That's how much it costs to do a customization additive for START.
Right. Do anyone else have a question? Is that you, Patrick?
Yeah, I'll throw one out, and that is, so speaking to the capacity element of this, how much support do you expect to need to directly give schools when they get rolling here? And kind of to that end, is there a plan to build capacity or to kind of slow the growth of this to accommodate current capacity?
That is a really good question that I'm hoping. I don't want to curtail any of it, if we don't have to. I find out next week if I won this pretty large grant, and if we do that, it'll allow me to hire a few folks to help me with this. START is built in a way where it's supposed to, it's pretty intuitive. Again, I say that knowing it fully, so it might be sort of myopic for me to say that. But I hope that really the questions that are coming are more technical, and if those questions come in that are more technically based around the tool, that those all get directed to our developers. But Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to answer that question like fully because I don't know yet. I don't know what this is going to look like once it's fully launched. I don't know what kind of questions are going to come through, how much a one-on-one support schools will need. Again, I'm looking to Missouri as well to give us feedback on what that looks like.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, maybe one other thing that relates to our community specifically is like the how-to
Mm-hmm.
elements that's very intriguing. And you know, if there's one about the educational programming related to say SDG 13, that
Mm-hmm.
would be, and some of the other related ones for the clean community. You know, we've got great programs, resources like the Clean Collection that a lot of people just don't know these things exist. Like
Right.
Wendy, your AMS data stream program, or you know some of the work that Climate Generation is doing. I mean, there's a lot of great materials, but you know, when you talk to teachers around the country, they don't really know a lot about these things that would actually help them
Absolutely.
in their. And is there a way to kind of be intentional about connecting best practice and effective programming inside of those how-tos?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So this is what I had sort of mentioned earlier. So I don't want all the
Yeah.
how-to guides to be written by the GSA. The Greening Forward guides were written by students. If you are looking through guides within a metric, it would be very, very obvious, whether it's a GSA metric or whether it's a Greening Forward metric or anybody else, because they would have, their emblem and. So again, we're not trying to take anybody's work, but the really, which is what you're speaking to, which is part of the reason why we realize that the how-to guides are so important, is that there is all this great work and resources out there, but because the how-to guides are embedded in this structure, it allows the schools to really find those how-to guides in a way that make more sense, right? Like, oh, so the
Mm.
the guide is asking about green spaces, and I want to create a pollinator garden, and so they'd be able to go, to the, learn more around that metric, and they can put in those keywords, right, like gardens, and all of those
Yeah.
resources would be able to come up. So, again, based on sort of the resources that you're mentioning, I would welcome anybody who wants to give us guides. There was a group of high school students who came to Drawdown, and at the end of my presentation, they're like, hey, we're from upstate New York, and we've been writing resources for our school. Is it possible for us to give you our guides and import them into START? So it's already happening, which
Mm.
I'm really excited about. And I want to obviously give anybody who gives us, their guides full credit. It's just, again, it's just an easier sort of roadmap to those resources, as opposed to them sort of abstractly living on the internet.
If there's a template for like a preferred design of a structure, or like because a lot of the stuff would be easy to kind of transform into a guide structure that relates to, so it's not so jarring. But anything
Yep.
like that, I think that there's people who in our community who've already done a lot of lifting in that exact space. And if you've got thousands and thousands of schools looking to figure out how to do something, that
Right.
aligns very much with the purpose of Clean. So
Yes.
it's a more technical conversation, so maybe we should follow up. Maybe Katie and myself and others who want to join us, we should have a follow-up technical conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, here's our how-to guide. This is what it looks like. What I would say is, within those guides, they're built sort of like recipes. A lot of them have sort of addendums at the base of them that show, this is how to integrate your students in the process. There's sort of resources. So this is, not, we don't have to get super into it, but this is sort of the framework that our guides are written in.
Perfect.
For those individuals who, like, Missouri has no guides, but they understand how important they are, so they're going to follow this framework for creating their own guides. But again, if I'm importing resources from other organizations, sort of melding a little bit what they already have, so they don't have to rebuild them with the things that we need, so that the school, so whoever is implementing that guide again, has sort of a cost, difficulty, and impact associated with it. So anybody who's, importing a resource will give you a sort of set of guidelines. Like, these are the things that you need to address in your resource. And if your resource is something that's already published, then can you create sort of an addition to it that sort of calls attention to these aspects that are important, that are consistent through START.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably a wonderful. And if people want to follow up with you, the information is available.
Yes. So
you're easy to contact.
I'm easy to contact. Arle at Green Schools Alliance here at the right here. So yeah, feel free to email me. Let me know that this is where you heard me, so I have some context. Yeah,
Remember, these are recorded.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I would be more than happy to hop on a call later and talk about the technical aspects of importing people's resources or your own into the work that we're doing. Absolutely. I don't want
Perfect.
all of the how-to guides to come from the GSA. That's absolutely not. I want them to come from other individuals, different perspectives, different voices, and again, even more so, like, writing resources that are really regional. I think that's also really important to people.
Perfect. Well, we have overrun our time just a little bit, so I just beg understanding that we were just finishing up a thing. So thank you so very much for your time, and thank you for sharing this impressive work. I hope it all goes off well in the launch, and send some information out to the listserv so that we can share it and promote it and help grow the adoption of this impressive program. So thank you so much, and all, thank you for joining us today, and we'll listen to each other very soon. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Great presentation.
Thanks, everyone.